Dean in North Carolina. Dean had two questions. He had one for Craig and one for me. Looks like Dean was asking why your objection to the Kalam argument, and to me, he wanted to talk about faith a bit more. Is that right, Dean?
Correct. My question for Craig is this. You said that the Kalam argument doesn't work because the initial premise is that whatever exists has a cause. And I don't want to be too hard here, but the first premise of the Kalam says that whatever begins to exist has a cause, not whatever exists has a cause. So I'm wondering, would you still agree if the first premise is whatever begins to exist has a cause? Would you still hold the position that the Kalam doesn't work, and if so, why?
I don't actually know the Kalam well enough, but the first time I read it through a few times, and I was like, okay, it doesn't work. The thing that I just threw out in the moment was just what I remembered about it. But what we were talking about was that Kalam is one of many of these apologetics that the holes that tend to get poked in them by the atheists or the skeptical people are actually the real holes of the argument. What I was trying to point out to Dan is if there is an actual proof of God, it's going to be case closed. You can get the smartest atheist in town, who may be Dan, maybe Dan's the smartest atheist, and he'll come.
Not true,
and he'll try to find a poke. He'll try to poke a hole in the argument and won't. But as far as the Kalam itself, the first premise is what? Everything that exists.
Whatever
I don't know the debate. What is it?
Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Right. Is that an absolute fact? I mean, in order for that to even be true, that's got to be an absolute fact. And I don't know that can't be debatable for it to be a logical proof. That's got to be A equals A. No argument. 2 + 2 = 4. No argument. It can't be everything that begins to exist has a cause. As far as we know, sure, it sounds reasonable, but not necessarily. And then you have the atheists do okay, so what caused God? And yeah, they're just being smart alecks in the moment, but it kind of debunks the whole, then what caused God? And then we, the Christian, have to play the game of, well, God doesn't get to have a cause because, and then they go, well, special pleading, and they're correct. I don't find any need to prove in a way that doesn't quite prove. I honestly believe that God is real, like almost 150%. So as far as I'm concerned, there will be such a thing as a real proof where people will be like, you'll have the most atheist guy in town and he won't have crap to say about it. So I don't know if that.
I would certainly love to chat with you, at some point in time about some of the things that you mentioned about the Kalam. I guess that raises another question for me then, with regards to the method of evangelism that you use with someone like Dan. My question would be, so when you're talking to someone and they say, well, what evidence or what arguments would you make for the existence of God if you're not using the Kalam or the ontological argument or the teleological argument? I mean, is it one of those things where you just throw up your hands and just say, well, it's because of a personal experience that I have, or because the Bible says it? I guess that's my question.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question. You tell me. I don't know this, and if you want to send me stuff on the Kalam that spells it out, so I'll revisit it. I'm perfectly willing to do that and give it a second look. But have you ever seen anybody? Because I haven't. Where someone said, "What's your evidence?" and they've done an argument, and the person's gone, "Yes, I agree. I'm convinced." Because I haven't even seen anything close to it. If I saw somebody become convinced by it, I might change my opinion for sure, but I've never seen anybody. I would love to find out. There are some atheists out there or Christians out there who used to be atheists, and I'd love to hear from them why. Because, yeah, I don't know what the most convincing thing is. I'm not sure if that's my agenda. I totally hear what you're saying. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, so I actually, and maybe we can talk offline about that. I mean, how would you and I don't want to put, I guess I will put Dan on the spot. How would you, if you were talking to Dan about returning to Christianity and you think that these arguments don't work, how would you reach Dan? How would you say, all right, this is the reason why you should come back to Christianity?
Okay, well, this is actually how I do it. Dan is an atheist. I'm on his show right now. As far as Dan knows, I don't think I've evangelized to him even a little overtly. Now, if I'm evangelizing at all, it's totally covert. He's seeing my example and he's going, well, Craig seems to be a decent, reasonable guy. That's step number one. If they don't think you're a decent, reasonable human being, you aren't planting any seeds. I'm planting seeds, which is what the Bible tells you to do. Plant seeds, seed time harvest, and then give God the harvest. That's what the Bible says, actually. Give the harvest up to God, and then you pray for. So I pray for Dan. I actually do. That's 100% true. Not that much, because whatever. There's Shannon out there. I pray for her more. Other than that, I think that's doing my. If I have a God job, and I do, I've heard preachers say your God job. I think I do my God job, even with Dan. I think ultimately there's a lot that you got to leave either up to God or up to the person. Maybe he's working something out. If we're right, if you and I are right and God is real, maybe Dan needs to go through this journey and, be this dark atheist, cool atheist. He's like, friend, he's so cool with his atheist, who knows?
In other words, Craig, you just kind of have to have faith, right?
Exactly. I have faith in his, ultimately I have faith in his reasonableness. I really do. And I don't feel like I have to give the hard sell to anybody. And if people ask for the hard sell, I usually find that they're full of garbage. They're trying to get you to do an argument so they can debunk you, and then you go through this pointless song and dance. I'd rather do this.
So last question for Craig before I turn to Dan. So
don't take up too much time now, Dean. We got other callers.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This is a good call. Dan.
So Craig, do you think that, and I don't know, maybe you have or haven't heard of it, do you think that the apologetics arguments for the historicity of the resurrection are good, or do you lump them in with the Kalam, the ontological, teleological as well?
There's a huge problem with that one. The problem is that's the least convincing aspect of Christianity. I've seen really smart Christians get smoked on that by, Apologia, who's pretty sharp. I'll give him that. But they got smoked on those arguments because that's an extraordinary leap of faith. To say, if you're talking about Jesus having risen from the dead, that's the least convincing aspect of Christianity. That is the hardest part to get over the finish line. If you're trying to convince somebody that there's reality to your faith, you should start with the easiest. I give you milk because you're not ready for solid food. Here's the easiest thing for you to accept. There's a benevolent God who loves you. People will be like, okay, I can maybe get with that. Don't go to the most challenging, and then they say, I think that's what you asked. I might have got that wrong. Did I get that wrong?
I got you. That's fine. All right, just because time is waning, Dan, real quick. So when you use the term faith, are you using the Peter Boghossian line of faith of pretending to believe things that you don't know, or are you saying like it's a confident trust?
I'm using the Craig Reed definition of faith, I think. It's the just trust in a higher power, trust in things that you don't quite understand. I think that's how most Christians use the word faith. I know that there are a sect of Christians that try to use the word faith in other kinds of contexts, but the majority of my experiences leads me to conclude that Christians are, in general, using the word faith as a kind of implicit trust in something, especially a trust in something that they may or may not have good evidence or arguments or reason to believe is true.
Okay. And we can talk more about that at some other time. I'll let other callers get on the line.
Sure.
Thank you guys for letting me call in and take up some chunks of time. I really appreciate the show.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. And
Awesome.
Dean, you're always welcome to call back, man. Thanks again.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah, get me back on the show and then call back. We'll talk more.
Dean has called the show before. He's a cool guy. He is one of the few Christians that right now that is a Patreon for Truth Wanted, which is awesome. I'm really proud to say that my show has Christian supporters, which you can support also, by the way, if you go to patreon.com/truthwanted. That's the thing. So definitely check that out. I don't get any of that money. All that goes straight to the ACA, helps improve shows like this and other shows on the network and makes them better. That's my quick plug there, I guess. Yeah, what'd you think of that conversation, Craig? Because this is not the first time I've actually talked to Dean about this idea of faith. Do you agree with my definition of faith, or do you think that faith is something else?
I like your definition a lot. Faith has a lot of ways you can define it. One way would be like that never gets thrown around these conversations is belief in the character of God, which you kind of used in when you were defending my my sloppy witness to you, or my sloppy, like, what you were kind of defending me for not giving you a hard sell, and you kind of said faith in the character of God. That's one that never gets thrown out there, but I like your definition. Yeah, it worked for me.
Okay,
totally. I think that was a good productive call.
Yeah, that was super great.